Hello all, welcome back. In this video, we'll be talking about client credentials flow. Now, this is one of my favorite flows because this is something where you have enormous potential from a security perspective to attack and defend. Now, just imagine that you have an application that you have developed maybe in Python or maybe in Java that you want to constantly poll a specific API to get information and use that information to your processing willpower. For example, you have created the service which pings Office 365 or Outlook APIs to get email to see if there is any email that was received for that particular email ID. You can do that using Outlook APIs or you can use that using MS Graph APIs. Now, let's just imagine that you're going to use Microsoft Identity Provider, which is Azure Active Directory, for doing that. Now, what this daemon app or service would do, which is typically something that runs in a background without any user interaction, is it will send a request to slash token endpoint along with the scope that it wants, the client ID and the client secret, and the grant type is going to be client credentials. The same is validated to the identity provider, and in the response, the token is received if all the permissions are admin consented. Now, this is something that we have talked about in a previous video regarding API permissions and scopes. So if you have not watched that video, I highly recommend that you go ahead and watch that video. Now, using the token, the daemon or the app is going to access APIs in the resource provider, and based on the validity of the token, the data is returned. Now, if a token is again required, the daemon is going to use this particular endpoint to slash token and is going to get the token. Now, interesting thing over here from a security perspective is you have something called as a client secret. So the entire authentication is dependent on a specific secret, which can either be a password or it can be a certificate, which is what we've seen in application credentials section in a previous video. So if you have not watched that, I highly recommend that you do that. So if an attacker gets access to this particular client credentials, which is client ID and client secret, whatever permissions that this particular application was consented in a delegated way is all now with the attacker. The attacker can now maintain persistent access to those APIs using the stolen client ID and client secret. So from a security perspective, what you can do about this is you could periodically check if these applications actually have any any business validity for performing any actions. Based on that, you could filter these applications and you could remove applications which are obsolete and from time to time. And the second thing is you can rotate these client credentials on a typical monthly or bi-monthly basis based on your information security policy, and you can ensure that these client credentials are not stored anywhere inside your code, inside any of your users machines, or these certificates are not residing in a public repository or in a repository which is accessible to attackers. So you can restrict access to places where the client credentials are stored with your inherent security controls.